Hello! It's such a pleasure to be chatting to the awesome Chris Williamson. Yeah, exactly. Can we just have another clap? Because I think he's been an incredible force for left politics this summer. And I want to say thank you. So first of all, Chris, can we clone you? Like maybe 320 times?
We've got actually hundreds of thousands of clones, because the Labour Party's never been more united, we've never been stronger, and there are many, many people in here that would easily do the job that I do, and a far better job than many current members of the Parliamentary Labour Party.
Yes, so this summer you've been on the road with the Democracy Roadshow, quite a rock and roll name. Can you tell us a bit more about what you've been campaigning for?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's based around the democracy review that the party's embarked upon, and I wanted to promote that and the wider and greater democracy within the Labour Party, but I also wanted to discuss the idea of mandatory selection for MPs, because I think it's really important. You know, democracy is such an important concept, really, and Tony Benn once said that in order to democratise society, we need to democratise our party first. And if you think about it, there are very few, if any, actually, democracies around the world where they don't have an open selection in between elections. Even the President of the United States of America has to go through a primary process to be selected to stand again for a second term. So there's nothing to be frightened about democracy. And frankly, as an MP, if you can't win the confidence of your members to continue to carry the Labour banner, you don't deserve to be the Labour candidate in the subsequent election, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, it is a real privilege to be a Member of Parliament, particularly to be a Labour Member of Parliament. And I mean, some people talk about it being a job, and I always make the point, it is not a job. If you want a job, go and work on a building site like I used to do, or get a job in an office, or become a journalist, or whatever. Do a proper job. Being an MP is a privilege, not a job. And you're there as a representative to represent the people that elected you and to represent the values of the Labour Party. And not a single Labour MP would be in Parliament were it not for the fact that they stood in an election with the Labour Party on the ballot paper, and because of the hard work of Labour Party activists in their constituency. None of them would be elected. So those that say their mandate comes from the electorate is fine up to a point, but if you don't believe that you should be accountable to your members, I say fine, we'll go and stand as an independent pal, see how far you get. Not a single one of them would get elected, so that's my position.
Do you think democracy scares a lot of politicians?
It scares a lot of politicians, and it scares a lot of very powerful, faceless corporations and wealthy individuals that actually control, have most of the power in their hands. If you think about it, the political sphere in reality has ceded over the last 40 years so much power. Most of the power that's wielded in this country is wielded by, faceless, unaccountable corporations. And one of the things which is really key, I think, because people say, oh, this kind of democracy roadshow, democracy review, it's a bit of a navel contemplation. But, coming back to the Tony Benn point, we need to democratise a party to democratise our society. And we've got to recapture some of that power which we've given away. And I want to see a situation where we don't just have a democratised Labour Party, but we have a democratised workplace, we have a democratised economy as a whole, so that the economy works, and it's not just a slogan, it works in the interest of the many, not the few.
Yes. So can I just ask in a bit more detail, like what would you like to see ideally regarding selections? Like, what's the steps you'd like to see?
Well, we've made some progress at the last conference last month, and they've made it easier now to trigger a open selection in any given constituency. But I don't like the notion of a trigger ballot, because that implies a negative, hostile move by the members. And that's going to deter some people, I think, and it's going to invoke a lot of adverse publicity. And I would far sooner have it as a normal, routine part of the process where during every parliament, in the third or fourth year, say, there is an open selection and people can stand, and if the member of parliament can win the confidence of the members, and most will do that, it's got to be said, that's an incredibly empowering thing for the member of parliament to win get that vote of confidence from their members. So I think that's really, really important that we do that. And one of the things I was saying at as I went round and indeed I'm still doing so, in this Democracy Roadshow, was that apart from other democracies having open primaries and so on, there are no other elected position in any organisation, whether it be a trade union or a community organisation, where elected officials aren't subjected to periodic endorsements by the members. And the point I often make is, and people may have been to some of the Democracy Roadshows where I've made this point, even the secretary of Jeremy's Allotment Association has to go through a mandatory selection, not just once every 5 years, but every single year. I mean, can you imagine the allotment holders marching on the annual general meeting with their hose and their spades held aloft, demanding a change, and the secretary standing there with the arms on her hips saying, "How dare you, I've been the secretary of this allotment association since 19canteen, this is a democratic outrage." Well, they wouldn't say that, would they? It's just a routine, normal, democratic procedure, and that's how it should be seen, it seems to me, in terms of determining who our members of parliament are, or our candidates for to stand for
Unfortunately,
parliament.
some of the proposed reforms were blocked at conference. How optimistic are you that we can still adopt them?
Well, I'm very optimistic, because the numbers of constituency delegates who, for example, supported open selections was well over 90%. But the democracy reforms didn't just relate to how we select our candidates. And indeed, in the Democracy Review, they didn't even look at that. It wasn't part of their terms of reference. That's something that grassroots members themselves took it upon themselves to push for. But we looked at, the process for selecting our leader. And I think that needs to be further improved. I mean, we've left the threshold to get onto the ballot paper at 10% of the Parliamentary Labour Party. In my opinion, I don't think MPs should have any say over who the MP or the candidates to become the MP should be. If there's going to be gatekeepers, in my view, it ought to be the constituency Labour Party. But my preference would be to have, so many, 5 or 10% of MPs, or 5 or 10% of constituency Labour parties, or 5 or 10% of trade unions. Not an and situation. But we've got to look at wider democratic reforms, how we make policy. If we were to put members in charge of determining policy, that would be an incredibly liberating and empowering thing to do for members, but I think it would also be an incredibly empowering tool for us to win elections and to sustain ourselves in power. And it was Ed Miliband who once said that if we trusted our members, we wouldn't have made as many mistakes when we were in government between 1997 and 2010. Just imagine if we'd had members in control of policy. We wouldn't have gone to war in Iraq. We wouldn't have introduced tuition fees. We wouldn't have cut benefits for some of the poorest people in society. We'd have had a big council house building programme. We wouldn't have further deregulated the financial services. We'd have given young people a decent stake in our society with a career path. We'd have tackled the housing crisis. So many things that we didn't get right. If we'd listened to our members, we wouldn't have made those mistakes. And actually, I don't believe we'd have lost the election. We'd still be in government today. Yeah. So I think we should be definitely doing that. And we need to democratise our local government structures as well. I mean, there was a suggestion that the leaders of Labour groups should be elected by local members in each borough. And I think that is, again, an incredibly powerful proposition. And it isn't just the Westminster bubble. There isn't just that phenomenon. There is a town hall bubble as well. I used to be a leader of a council, and I've seen it in action. And again, that Ed Miliband maxim about trust the members, listen to the members, and you won't make as many mistakes. Well, all up and down the country, I can see Labour groups making all sorts of mistakes that they wouldn't be making if they'd listened to their members. So we shouldn't be afraid of democracy. Let's embrace it. Let's use it in terms of how we make policy, how we operate in local government. I think our regional structures are not fit for purpose either. regional offices ought to be reconfigured to be much more outward focused, to bring in members, to work with constituency Labour Party, to promote political education, to help members, discuss things like modern monetary theory and universal basic income and a whole host of other issues, so that we're, upskilling members and engaging in a kind of whole political education process to make our meetings much more engaging and much more interesting. Because I don't know how many people go to their local ward party meetings, constituency party meetings, but sometimes it can be pretty turgid, can't they? And for new members coming along, they don't particularly want to hear about the minutes of the last meeting, Treasurer's report, and how many potholes we've filled in and how many street lights we've managed to get. Not that that's unimportant, it is important, of course, but there are other bigger issues at play here. And what we're talking about is not just winning an next election. We're talking about changing the course of history, creating a new consensus, putting in place an irreversible shift in the balance of wealth and power in our country. And these are things I think members want to talk about and participate in.
And I think, the fact that Corbyn had such huge support really illustrates your point. People are desperate for this new alternative way of doing things. So people like you and I and everyone here, we're quite often labelled hard left. We're hard left, we're radical, we're extreme, we're scary. And the people that are upholding the system of war, inequality and environmental destruction are moderate. I'd like to ask you, how can we reclaim, the centre ground for kinder, fairer politics?
I think we've already reclaimed it. If you look around and look at the policy programme that the Labour Party's now embraced, whether it be bringing our railways and utilities back into public ownership, scrapping tuition fees, building council houses, clamping down on tax evaders, and the whole gamut of policy proposition that that we're setting out there, a proper green strategy and so on. It's overwhelmingly supported. 70 to 80% of the public back that. Yeah. And again, apologies to anybody who's heard me say this before, but I remember watching Giles Brandreth going around looking for secret socialists in the capital of the home counties in Guildford. And he was stopping people and asking them if they supported renationalisation of the railways, building council houses and having an entirely publicly run National Health Service, kicking the privateers out and so on. About half a dozen issues, and they're all going, yes, I agree with that, I agree with that. And then he said, well, you're a secret socialist, madam. Then what do you mean by that? And then he had this clipboard and he turned it around, there's a big picture of Jeremy Corbyn on it, and they stepped back in horror at first.
They were horrified.
But that was because Jeremy had been demonised at that time. And I think when we get an opportunity, when we get a fair crack of the whip during an election campaign, when we have to, the broadcasters have to give us a fair representation, and people can see Jeremy, can see the policies that we are putting forward, people rally to us. And I say, our challenge as Labour Party activists is obviously to, maintain the support that we've got, and that was great, and we did well in the last election, the biggest increase in vote share since 1945, a bigger vote total than two of the landslide elections that Tony Blair achieved. But our challenge, it seems to me, isn't to just convince those Tories, as some people say, our route back to power is to convince Tories to vote Labour. Well, I'm not against Tories having a Damascene conversion, but I'm not in favour of chasing Tories. Our job, I think, particularly as a Labour Party, a party that ought to be standing up for working class, disadvantaged, vulnerable communities, is to go after the biggest cohort in every single election, which is the non-voters. When I lost my seat in 2015, before I made the comeback in 2017, the Tories got in Derby North with 16,500 votes. We got 41 less than that. Wow. But the non-voters in Derby North on that occasion were 25,000. 10,000 more people didn't vote than the winning total. Across the country, 15.6 million people didn't vote. The Tories got in with, what was it, about 11.5 million. This time the Tory vote did go up, yes, 13 million, but still the biggest cohort were the non-voters, 14.4 million people. Now, it's fantastic what the Labour Party is doing. We are employing some community organisers now. We need a lot more of them, but we're all got to be community organisers, because what we've got to get to a place, in my opinion, is where we're doing politics with people, not to people. And there's still far too many people out there who are cynical about politics, who don't feel that the Labour Party is speaking to them, they're not hearing our message, and maybe our message does need to be refined still. So we've got to speak to people, we've got to hear what they're saying, and not just go out and patronisingly hear them and then go off and do our own thing, but bring people in. Allow people to kind of influence and change our kind of policy programme. And it's just about, if you like, rediscovering that sense of social solidarity, that spirit of 1945 that my mum and dad's generation, were part of when they came back from the war and said, we ain't going back to the indignity of the means test, to being fearful about getting ill or being injured at work because they couldn't afford the medical fees, and being frightened about the landlord and having to live in crappy accommodation and so on. They wanted something better, and they voted for something better, and we delivered something better. But I think we can deliver something even better than what we did in 1945 with Jeremy Corbyn as our leader, because in my opinion, Jeremy's the best leader we've had since Keir Hardie.
I agree, surprisingly. But I do know a lot of people on the left who are quite lukewarm about Corbyn. They say stuff like, oh, I like him, but I'm not sure about this. And I really feel they're missing the point of the urgency of today's situation. Like, we're destroying communities and our planet. We need change, and we need it fast. How do we communicate to those on the left that this is such a unique opportunity? Because leaders like Corbyn don't get in easily. I tend to view it as like a glitch in the matrix. It won't happen again. So how can we kind of take those people who are lukewarm and like, I'll vote for him, but I'm not sure about Brexit or this or that. How can we kind of communicate that, we don't have much time to change from an economic system that is destroying life and lives and move to one that values people and planet over profit? How can we communicate that?
I mean, I think there are a number of audiences, aren't there, out there, and I think in terms of that internal audience, the kind of, if you like, the soft left, or whatever, for want of a better phrase, although I don't think it's much a kind of question of left and right, it's more a question of right and wrong, and the country's been going in the wrong direction for 40 years. But, I mean, I think just kind of making the point to people, look, our policy programme is incredibly popular. There's never been an easier time to campaign for the Labour Party, and like you say, this is it's more rare than a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the challenges facing the country, facing the world. We had the IPCC report recently saying the real problems around climate change, and we've had.
And we just allow fracking in the country.
Exactly, and obviously our position is to ban fracking. But look, the eyes of the world are upon us, and I think winning in Britain for Labour is obviously going to make a big difference here, but I think it will really inspire people around the world. I mean, Jeremy, gets invites in India. I even get invites to, frankly, to go to places, different countries, to talk about, what we're doing here. People are inspired all over the world, looking at what we've achieved in this country. So we really owe it not just to ourselves, but to the entire world, because the world, I mean, I might be kind of sounding a bit overdramatic, really is kind of depending on us in many ways, because we've absolutely got to rise to that challenge around the IPCC, and the market ain't going to do it. No. It absolutely isn't. We need a common sense socialist government to actually take those decisions, which are absolutely necessary. We can't leave this to the market. And there's another big challenge coming our way as well, and that's the fourth industrial revolution. What are we going to do? Because we've got, robotics and artificial intelligence is going to take a lot of jobs, and we have a real opportunity, it seems to me, to use that. I remember growing up in the 1960s and 70s and being told to get ready for the leisure generation, because by the 1990s we're only supposed to be working 15 hours a week. Of course, that never happened. But even John Maynard Keynes was predicting that by the 21st century we would only be working around 10 or 15 hours a week, and that the challenge is going to be how do we, make use of our leisure time. And so what we need to be getting to a place where we're kind of preparing young people, not just for the world of work, but just, for the world as a whole. And, Tony Benn once talked about increasing the school leaving age to 75. And because he was kind of very committed to lifelong learning, and he said that a couple of weeks later, received a letter from a disgruntled 85-year-old who said, "Why are you discriminating against me, Mr. Benn? I've just graduated from the Open University." So I think we have a real opportunity, and I urge people to become 21st century Luddites. The Luddites have had a bad rap, It's been used as a pejorative term, hasn't it? Yeah. And if you think, what were the Luddites saying? All they were saying was, we want technology to be our servant, not our master. Yeah. They were skilled artisans who had a reasonable income and secure lifestyle. And they were just thrown on the scrap heap. Yeah. We don't need you anymore. Yeah. You're surplus to requirements. Yeah. You've got a life of penury now. Little wonder they went around smashing up machinery. I'd like to think if I'd have been around then, I'd have been joining them. But we could be 21st century Luddites saying we are going to use technology as our servant to actually create that sort of society that we were being told about in the 1960s. Local authorities at that time were being told you've got to build leisure centres and swimming pools and golf courses and tennis courts and a whole manner of things to give people things to do, because of this that iteration of automation was going to lead to a lot of spare time. So I think there's that. We could be investing in education. We could, have a universal basic income. I'm a big convert to that as well, I think. And invest in our public services. Reward social care workers who are at the bottom of the income scale, and they're doing some of the most vitally important work in our society. Invest in our NHS, invest in education and the rest of it. And tackle the housing crisis. I used to be a bricklayer. It's an incredibly labour-intensive occupation. If we can reduce the working week as well, there'll be a load more bricklayers if you're only having to work 15 or so hours a week rather than the 40 hours that we used to do. And we've talked about a big house building programme, a big renaissance in council housing for the first time. Council housing, a term that never dare speak its name for the last 40 years. And, building homes for people, that will actually tackle a social crisis. It will create jobs. It will reduce social security as well, because we can provide a lower cost alternative to the private rented sector, which is ripping people off left, right and centre. So all these things are just plain common sense. That's why I keep talking about common sense socialism. And I think to those doubting Thomases, I would say, look at what we achieved. The biggest increase in vote share since 1945, with the worst possible run into an election that you could ever have possibly imagined. And yet we achieved it. We have inspired young people. The biggest cohort in this election were young people. I used to be told when I got elected in 2010, I was a bit of a dreamer even then, and I said, surely our job is to appeal to the non-voters, to appeal to young people, to give people a reason to vote. And I was saying, if you give people a reason to vote, they'll turn out and vote. And I was patronised and told by people like Tom Harris, who now writes for the Daily Telegraph. He said, look, Chris, the thing about people that don't vote is they don't vote, so don't waste your time. And as for young people, yes, they'll turn up at rallies and make a lot of noise, but they won't actually bother to vote. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we've seen with Jeremy's policy programme and the sort of agenda that we put out there and the energy that we put into that campaign. I've never been involved in a campaign like it. It's the best campaign I've ever been involved with. It's incredible. I didn't want it to end. And the biggest cohort were young people. So the future belongs to us. The future is socialist, and we are in the business of making history. And I say to people, you ain't just members of the Labour Party here, or Labour Party supporters. You're history makers, comrades. You've got to go out and make history. Yeah.
We could chat all night, but I think we have time for one more question. And I wanted to ask you, the smear attacks are going to keep on coming. We've done like 25 of these events around the country. And when we started organising them, there was a big pool of acts. And gradually that shrunk. And basically the media onslaught really swayed a lot of people. And that was quite sad to see, because a lot of these people were my friends, and You know, they're good people, they're decent people, but the constant media attacks do have an effect. And also, if you open any history book, it's full of socialist leaders and governments being overthrown and demonized and destroyed. So my final question is, you know, what inspires you to keep hopeful that change is possible?
I absolutely believe change is possible because I've never seen a more energized and inspired movement, Labour movement. This is the best it's ever been, I think. We've got a hugely engaged and motivated grassroots, and I think the prize is enormous. As I've said already, it's not just about winning an election, it's about changing the course of history. And the thing that kind of keeps me going, I'm sure the thing that keeps Jeremy going, is despite the attacks in Parliament and in the media, when we go round, there's such love, and it is genuine love out there, and hope, that we can build a better world, and we really, really can. But it's just going to be down to us. Smears, as you say, are not a new thing. Go back to 1924 election, I think it was, with the Daily Mail and the Zinoviev letter, kind of forgery that was claiming, that the Labour Party were agents of the Soviet Union and one thing and another. But we rose. We managed to get through that. We'd had a great election. Last time, if it had gone a bit longer, I think we would have won. But it's going to be down to us. And I'm always struck by that quote from the Shawshank Redemption, when Red Redding says to Andy Dufresne, because Andy Dufresne's talking about hope, and he's incarcerated in prison with no release in sight. And he said, Red Redding says to Andy Dufresne, he said, Andy, hope is a very dangerous thing in this place. And Andy responds by saying, no, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. And thank God for Jeremy Corbyn, because he kept the flame of socialism burning, and as Tony Benn said once, I'll finish off with a quote from Tony, there are two flames that burn in the human heart, the flame of anger against injustice and the flame of hope that we can build a better world. And we can build a better world through collective solidarity.
Before we go, I just want to say a quick shout out to the NHS store at the back. Please go and check them out. They're doing great work. They're run by an amazing doctor called Dr. Bob Gill, and he's funded an incredible documentary that will be out soon called The Great NHS Heist. Please go, please support them, because they're fighting on all our behalf. And finally, I just want to say a massive thank you to Chris. It's so great to have people like you who are full of integrity and courage fighting on our behalf. So thank you.